Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Tennis and Bagels podcast. As you can see on your screen here, joining me is Hall of Famer, returning champion. He's a very familiar guest by now. Hall of Famer, you know him very well. Steve Flink. How are you, Steve? I love doing these post-major recaps with you, and our
Yeah, same
listeners
here,
love it as
Vansh.
well.
Good to see you. Yet another major behind us, and we've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we sure do. And I guess let's just get started right away. Obviously, let's go a little bit bigger picture with Djokovic here. Obviously wins his 23rd major. That's the most of all time. Third Roland-Garros title, by far the toughest of his four majors to win. He said it himself. And now
Yeah,
it's even more remarkable that he's won two of the last three, and he's won every single major at least three times now. And we're looking at another possibility of the Grand Slam.
yeah. And not
And
to mention, Vansh, he's personally won his last three because, of course, he couldn't play the U.S. Open last year. So he won Wimbledon, and that was it for him last year. And then on to Australia and Paris this year. So he's on another one of his remarkable streaks.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, let's talk a little bit by just how clutch he was under pressure, which has obviously become a major asset for him in the last several years. He certainly had it to a certain degree in the early part of his career, but more so, I would say, in the last 8 or 9 years, especially if you want to look at his major finals record. He's 17-4 since losing that 2014 Roland Garros match. He at one point was 6-7 in major finals, and I guess you could also say 15 of the last 18 since he
Yeah,
lost to
exactly.
Stan.
I mean, which sterling stat do we want to choose? Which one wins over the other? They're both astounding. Listen, it's interesting because he actually was 5-2 at one time. He had that great 2011, and then he started having his struggles. And ever since, boy, he's just been magnificent when it counts.
Yeah, absolutely. And that shows in his tiebreak play as well. Of course, everyone knows this stat because it's been talked about so many times now. But in those six tiebreaks that he played in this championship, not a single unforced error and 17 winners to go along with it. And that's 55 big points played. And
Yeah,
it's just remarkable his ability to raise his level in those
I mean,
moments.
think about that, Vanch. Think about that 55 points. It's the better part of a set. It could be a quick set, but it certainly would be, say, 8-9. You could say eight games or nine. I mean, that's remarkable, and it's not an accident either, because he primes for those tie breaks. But what I find astounding is that he doesn't. It's not like he says, "Okay, I'm going on defense here. I'm not going to miss a ball. I'm just going to get every ball back, and they'll crack." No, when he has an opening to be aggressive, as he did on the first point of the tiebreak in the final against Ruud, and he ripped that forehand winner down the line, he goes for it and he makes it. And this was maybe his best collection of tie breaks in a tournament ever, I would say. To go 6-0, and they were a part of almost every match, and sometimes they were crucial. That was true in the final. It was true in the second set against Khachanov to avoid going down 2-0. It was certainly true against Davidovich Fokina, who really pushed him hard.
Yeah, and I thought that Davidovich Fokina match was really, really key for him, just in terms of it being an indicator for, how sharp is he going to be in the later stages of this tournament. Because as you and I both know, he didn't have a great deal of success in these warm-up events, even in Rome, and he was always kind of struggling with niggling injuries, really all throughout this year, actually, even if you include Australia. And it
Yeah,
just,
has been.
yeah,
You're right.
and he's
And
made it
and
clear that the focus is all on the majors, and once again, he's found a way to play his best.
But you think about it, what stands out to me is, you remember, say, 2 years ago when he won his second French, and he was struggling in the beginning, he wasn't feeling well at the beginning. He kind of got going. He eventually made the finals of Rome, and then he played another tournament in Serbia. He wins that. His formula is usually to make sure he plays a lot on the clay, and he wants to build a little confidence. He didn't really get that opportunity this time, and he had to skip Madrid. And then Rome was his best with a quarterfinal. That was his best. So that I felt like that might hinder him more going into this. Just the lack of match play, because he'd already missed Indian Wells in Miami, and the lack of confidence of not doing better, having some kind of a lift, because every other year, either winning Rome, getting to the final of Rome, there's been something to kind of spur him on, to make him feel like his best form is just about there. Didn't have that this time, and you're right. There were the niggling injuries. There was the elbow, and then apparently in Rome also he had some kind of an issue with his shoulder.
Yep.
So they weren't necessarily crippling injuries, but they were nagging and they were definitely getting in his way. So that's why the Fokina Davidovich, that's why that match is so crucial, because the first two sets were marathons, and the Spaniard served for the first set after 3 doubles from Novak in the previous game, and Djokovic broke back and wins that in a tiebreak, 3-1 down. And then he's in the second set tiebreak after he'd saved a set point on his serve at 5-6. He was up 4-1 double mini break, and the next thing you know, he's down 4-5 serving. He'd lost 4 points in a row, and he managed to win 3 in a row to close that out. And as he said later, I mean, it was still 3 hours, 36 minutes. He said later that it could have been 5 hours. And he's right. If he loses one of those sets, I don't think he would have allowed himself to lose. I don't think he would have lost the match, but he would have been out there a lot longer. It would have been aggravating. It was very windy, as you know, through almost every day of this tournament. The final was a bit better, although the wind acted up midway through the final, but it's certainly better conditions than most of the other days. So, yeah, I think that third round match was critical.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And then, of course, then he was down a set against Khachanov as well. And,
yes,
a lot of, Khachanov came out playing very well, hitting his forehand, extremely aggressive. And you saw Djokovic go to those higher, loopier, moonball type shots as well to get some of the rhythm back and, assert himself with his own forehands. And right from 5-6 in the second set, I felt like the match and the momentum completely shifted, and he went into this gear where he was playing the best tennis that I've ever seen him play this year in terms of for the third set. And
certainly, especially from the tiebreak where he didn't lose a point against Khachanov through the 6-2 third set, right up to 4-2 in the fourth. He was brilliant. Then he, serving into the wind, he got broken. He was a little aggravated, but even that was just a blip on the radar screen, because from 4-all, he didn't lose another point, 8 straight points. So, yes, that was an interesting match. And I don't know, you probably saw his press conference. He said afterwards he thought those were the first 2 sets were the worst he'd played in the tournament. That was the most negative he sounded. And then he was pleased that he played a really good tiebreak and the rest of the way, but he wasn't happy with how he'd started that. But still, he finished it strong enough that I think he came into the Carlos Alcaraz match in the very good frame of mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk about that Carlos Alcaraz match. Obviously, so much anticipation, so much pressure for for the first time, it felt like in a really, really big match, best of 5. Djokovic was the underdog according to the bookies, and and Carlos had some pressure and weight on his shoulders in terms of being able to deliver on a really big stage like this. And that certainly seemed to be what decided it in the end at 1-1 in the third set, when we saw him have full body cramps. At first it was the hand, then we later found out it was kind of the whole body, and I just felt like it was the combination of the physicality as well, the heat, but more importantly the nerves, which he even admitted as well, that nervous energy and just that cramp. We saw it before in Miami against Sinner, but this had to be really debilitating for him to not be able to really play anywhere close to his best for the rest of the match.
Yeah, I mean, it was reminiscent of the Sinner match, but even worse. Well, I thought it was just very revealing that he would talk about the nerves. He was very honest about it, about how it was the nerves, and it obviously specifically directed it at playing Djokovic. He didn't just say, well, it's the semifinals. No, he said it's playing Djokovic here. He understood what it was, a recognition of Djokovic's expertise, you might say, in these surroundings, and how he's so tough to beat in majors. And I was surprised that he was as candid as he was about that. I mean, and in turn, Djokovic talked about how he felt Alcaraz might have felt a little pressure, being the favorite for the first time. That was a little bit of a different feeling for him. Whatever the reasons, that was an incredibly severe reaction to cramps. I admired him, by the way, for staying out there those last 2 sets. I mean, yes, he had limited mobility, and sometimes if Novak wouldn't hit with enough angle or depth, Carlos would just take a big swing at it, just swing freely and go for the winner and make it, or make a drop shot. But it was so fleeting. So it was a shame, because I'm sure you agree the first 2 sets were just electrifying.
Yeah, it was electrifying tennis from both. And I thought in turn, Djokovic did his homework really, really well and started to, use some of the patterns that we've seen, for example, Carlos struggle against Sinner, with like the precision and the depth and the Djokovic's ability to just keep him camped in the forehand corner and rushed on that
Yes,
swing, and it was the backhand down the line, the forehand cross court sharp angles. And
yeah. I thought the forehand cross court, the backhand down the line was important and well executed. I thought the forehand cross court was the most important facet of it because he had to execute that well. And when they played in Madrid last year, he hit that shot very well also, and it almost won him the match. He ended up losing in a third set tiebreak. But this time, yeah, he kept him at bay in that first set. And I honestly feel that he had that little arm issue in the middle of the second set, you know, and where Novak. And yeah, he went to the changeover 3-4, still on serve, but in the previous game, his arm had been shaking his arm out when he held serve and hit a backhand down the line and sort of winced and shook the arm out. And I felt like it distracted him. He wasn't quite sure what to expect after the trainer came out and rubbed his arm. And that's when he ended up losing his serve to go down 5-3. But then it really surprised me. I thought Carlos would serve it out and we'd get on to the third. It would be interesting. And Djokovic made his move, broke back with that beautiful backhand down the line winner, and then from love 40 in the next game, that was spectacular what he did to hold serve at 5 straight points and get to 5-all. And then after all that, he has a break point in the next game and missed what for him was a fairly routine high backhand, certainly a ball he should have kept in play. And I think if he would have broken there, it probably would have been his set. Instead, he comes round at 5-6 a bit disappointed, gets broken at love after that serve volley attempt on the first point didn't work, and he missed the backhand volley cross court wide, the first volley. And so it was really interesting at that stage. I still think he felt like he was playing really well despite losing the second set. Carlos felt good that he initially, I think, just that he was back to 1-set-all and in the match. But then we had it was the image is sort of indelibly. It's etched indelibly in my mind. I mean, I can just still see him writhing there after missing the return to make it 1-all. Carlos, you know, after he missed that forehand return and then having to sit there with the trainer and get his legs rubbed, and it was so hopeless. And tough, I thought, for Djokovic too, because he wasn't quite sure how to play it from that point on. He wanted to just be solid and not go for too much, but he didn't want to also make it hit too many balls down the middle. It's always tricky when you have an opponent in that kind of condition, but he handled it with his typical professionalism and just got the job done. And next thing you know, he'd won those 6 straight games to win the third set, you know, after being down love 1, and then 5 more, 11 in a row before he finally lost a game. But it was sad to have tennis of that spellbinding quality for 2 sets and then have it just be to see that Carlos was so crippled the last 2. I don't know what your impressions were. I felt like Djokovic probably was going to win that match, had the cramps not occurred. But obviously, we're just speculating. I just feel like he wasn't that disconcerted. He was a little bit irked, and it came through a bit when he did his analysis of the match in the press conference. He alluded to that second set. You could tell he was a bit annoyed that it had gotten away in the end after the comeback. But I don't think that would have discouraged him that deeply. I think he was ready to get, as he said, he was ready to sort of start anew, start over. And then as far as Carlos is concerned, yeah, I think his attitude would have been good, but obviously with conditioning like that, I guess if he was in that mental state and had those nerves and wasn't able to break free of them, even after winning the second set, how is it not going to happen at some point along the way in the third? So I guess there was a certain inevitability in the end, sadly. And you hope that it's a problem that can be solved by him and his team, because you don't want to see too many Sinner matches or Djokovic matches, these 2 that we're talking about in Miami and Roland-Garros. You don't want to see that happen to. Oddly, as you know, at the U.S. Open last year, Alcaraz, 3 times came of a breakdown in the 5th set, started with Cilic and then Sinner. And then, he fought hard. He had a tough 5th set actually with Tiafoe, but he eventually broke free and won that in 5. But the thing is that he won 3 5-setters in a row, followed by a tough 4-setter, and his conditioning was there.
Yeah, it's interesting points you bring up, because I don't think actually I don't think it's a question of like durability and stamina, because he's shown us that before US Open. Along with also earlier in the clay court season last year when he played those 2 grueling matches against De Minaur and then won the final against Carreño Busta. So he's shown it many times that like physically physically he can last these long matches. I just wonder what he and his team do about the sort of nerve management in a big situation like this, moving forward, because obviously
he tries to stay relaxed. You've seen him with the smiling and the playing to the crowd in a very nice way. I don't mean that critically, but obviously there was something very different going on inside in the inner Alcaraz. It was a different story. He was obviously feeling that pressure immensely, and it's interesting given that he's won a major already. He won the U.S. Open last year. He would have been a threat in Australia, but he couldn't play there, and he'd had such a great spring. And yeah, one loss, but a couple of great titles. Again, he came in riding very high to Roland-Garros and confident. So it's interesting that how it all played out and how it plays out in the future too. To see if he gets in, say, some more similar situation at Wimbledon, what happens then? Can he conquer it? Is my question.
Yeah, and what do you sort of think about his chances on the grass? Because I did feel like sort of last year he lost that match against Zverev. He had some physical issues. I don't think he came into the tournament fully 100% healthy. In Roland-Garros, he skipped Rome before that. And he also didn't play any warm-up events, Queens or anything like that. And he had that really tough first round. And eventually Sinner was just too good and rushed him and was just the better player in that fourth round meeting. But I wonder what will sort of happen this time around, because I feel like he has some attributes that could be really, really good for him on the grass in terms of the aggressive game coming forward at net.
Yeah, I agree. He has a lot of good skills. Is it necessarily going to be his best court? I don't know. He takes such big cuts at his forehand. Will that be a factor? It's hard to. I don't doubt he'll adapt, but he's still relatively inexperienced. The draw will be interesting to see if he can get tested by some guys that are pretty good on that surface. How he answers that bell. What happens then? I mean, I don't think his confidence is greatly diminished or anything, but I do think he's coming in. It's still relatively foreign to him. And so I'm fascinated to see how he performs there. Certainly expect that Djokovic will be seeded 1, Carlos 2. So this time, I don't think we could see them meet before the final, unless Medvedev goes on some kind of a tear here, and picks up enough points to pass him. I don't know whether he really could. I doubt that, but it's possible.
Yeah, and you have to make Djokovic a very clear favorite at Wimbledon.
Oh, yes.
It's him against the field, really, at Wimbledon, because there's not too many contenders that I could really think of off the top of my head. And the one that comes to my mind right away is probably like Medvedev, but I just don't, even he has never been to the quarters at Wimbledon before, and even he is just not as natural for him as the hard courts or the other faster.
No, it's not. It's not. He's played some good grass court tennis in some of the other events. You see the potential, obviously, with his serve that helps, and he seems pretty comfortable off the ground from the backcourt. He looks okay, but again, you wouldn't call it his favorite court. You'd say hard courts. Obviously, he calls himself a hard court specialist, so I think that's largely true. So it's hard to know who are going to be the biggest threats to Novak in the end. I just expect that Djokovic will it'll be similar a bit to the last few years. I think the first few rounds he might struggle a bit. He won't have any grass court matches. He's not planning to play any tournaments. And the grass is so slick initially that I think maybe he has a few problems early on against whoever it might be, but you got to believe he'll survive that. And then by the third or fourth round, he's finding it. And the courts are also changing. And then by the second week, it's getting better and better for him. That's how I look at it. He won it 4 times in a row, 7 altogether, going to tie Rogers' record of 8. He already was confident enough being halfway to the Grand Slam, but now, being Wimbledon and the success he's enjoyed there in recent years and how well he's played there, I think he's going to be feeling really good about his chances. Plus, the other guys know how great he is in that venue.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I guess let's talk a little bit about Casper Ruud, because that's now 3 of the last 5 major finals that he's reached. And also he's been in so many big matches now already. But to me, this was an impressive effort and a pretty good showing for Casper. in the final as well, but also just throughout the whole tournament, just the way he took care of business, and also just knowing his form sort of coming in. You and I both, we talked previously that he took an off-season break in February, and of course he went on that long exhibition tour with Nadal, and he didn't have a whole lot of form coming into this French Open as well, just that one title in Estoril, but really, and started to play better in Rome, but then Jari beat him in Geneva. And, once I saw him get through that kind of a match in the fourth round, a player who can really rush him and make him very uncomfortable with his power and make him defend a lot on his backhand. Once he was able to survive that and came back from a breakdown in the second and the third set, I really felt like he's going to be really tough to stop with his forehand and physicality and just the confidence in best of five. I feel like those two major finals give him a lot of belief that in best of five he can, out physical most of the players on the tour on this surface. So
yeah, then I agree with all that. I think then it was interesting. Then he's in the quarters, and it's a rematch against Holger Rune, and that was an odd performance from Rune. I don't understand why he didn't recover better from the Cerundolo match. Granted, that was a very taxing fifth set tiebreak match. Could have gone either way. That could take a lot out of anybody. I get it, but it's a day off. You're 20 years old. I mean, I didn't understand that. He just seemed way out of sorts the first two sets. It was hard to tell what was going on. And then he managed to find a little bit of form in the third, but it was too late. And Ruud closed him out in 4 sets. So that was disappointing for the quality of the first 2 sets. It was disappointing from him. And I don't know, he puzzles me too with the conditioning, some of these conditioning issues, or some of the, I don't want to say lack of mental stability, but he's a little erratic mentally. There are times when he seems very mature, like he was when he played Djokovic in Rome. Did a nice job. When Djokovic won the second set, he just buckled right down and really was solid as a rock in the third. And he was amazing against Novak in that Paris indoor final last fall to beat him in that final. But so we've seen those times, but then we've also seen a lot of immaturity. So I credit Ruud for taking full advantage of it. And then the Zverev match, which I thought conceivably would have been very close, was not close at all. And we saw that Zverev had a leg injury, that there was a release sent out. He pulled out of the grass court tournament this week because of the leg injury that he happened to him Thursday, they say, in practice. So he was already hurting going into that match. It explains the one-sidedness. In fairness, Casper Ruud played a terrific match and probably would have been hard to beat anyway. I just think he would have had to work a lot harder. But nonetheless, who would have thought, Vansh, that he'd be back in that final? I mean, not the way he played through the preponderance of the clay court circuit. It was not a good clay court campaign. It hadn't been a good year all around. And he knew he was protecting a lot of points, and it could have worked very differently. And I really think that's going to bolster his confidence a lot, that he would be back in the finals 2 years in a row. And he played a much better match than he did against Rafa a year ago. To get back to your original point, it kind of reminded me a bit of the way Tsitsipas challenged Novak in Australia and was not even rewarded with a set. In that case, it was like one break for Novak in the first, on serve all the way in the second, Djokovic wins the tiebreak. Exchange early breaks in the third, another tiebreak, Djokovic wins that. So Tsitsipas had so little to show for his good play. This was kind of reminiscent, where in this case, Ruud was up a break in the first set, and Djokovic, managed to kind of shake free of whatever was going on physically or mentally to get it back on serve, and managed to hold on. Novak did from 4-5, love 30. I thought that was a big hold. Came to the net 3 of the next 4 points to hold on to get to 5-all. The set could have been gone there, but then they both held. So Ruud's done a nice job. He's still in a tiebreak, and then we get another immaculate tiebreak from Djokovic. Winning at 7-1. Brilliant start with a forehand winner, and he ends it with a forehand winner, an ace and a forehand winner, and was pretty spectacular in between as well. So I think that was very jarring for Ruud. But still, to get back to your point, okay, he gets broken early in the second. Djokovic, he made Novak work hard for the break, but Novak finally got it and raced off to that early lead and got up 5-2, even had a couple of set points, and Ruud served his way out of that before Novak closed the set up. So you can't say that's a terrible set, one break. He didn't collapse. And then the third, Ruud played quite well in the third. Fought off a break point at 1-all, didn't lose his serve until they got to 5-all. But those last 3 games from Djokovic were just first rate. I mean, he loses 1 point. He's hitting winners left and right. He had 2 aces in the 4-5 game that really helped him to take pressure off and get the hold and get to 5-all. And then from there, it was really a sight to behold. Only foot he put out of line was on the first match point at 40 love, because Ruud lobbed that return and Novak had to play an overhead off the return. And then on his next shot, he pulled a forehand wide that he would normally make. But that was no big deal because he sealed it on the second match point with ease. So I thought that was a great finish, a great start to the tiebreaker from Djokovic, a nice recovery from Djokovic in the first set, a really good second set from Djokovic, and then a good close those last 3 games. But Ruud standards were pretty high, Vanch. I mean, he couldn't have asked too much more from himself. You could tell he was a bit frustrated that he wasn't able to play a better game on his serve at 4-2 in the first set. Would have made a big difference if he holds for 5-2, and Novak broke him there, and that's where he got back into the set. But listen, he started really well. He acquitted himself well. To me, it was more reminiscent of the way he played against Carlos Alcaraz in the U.S. Open final than it was of the way Ruud played against Rafa in last year's French final. He made it more competitive, and he did a nice job. And who knows where he goes from here? But I gotta say, to look at what you were alluding to earlier, just look at Miami last year, and he's in the finals against Carlos, and then he's in the finals against Rafa at the French, finals against Carlos at the U.S. Open, finals against Novak in the year-end championships, and now this. But all of the opponents, these guys were just too good for him, and I think that's the hard reality for him, is how does he overcome players of that stature? Obviously 2 all-time greats in Novak and Rafa, and now an Alcaraz who's only going to get better. So, I mean, I don't think that Ruud can get too preoccupied with that bunch. He's got to just get on with his job, and he's doing that quite well. And I think getting to a second straight French final is going to really kind of spur him on for the rest of this season.
Yeah, I largely agree with a lot of what you said there. I mean, I would say you beat me to the Tsitsipas comparison, because I was going to make that one about the Australian final. But I do think he's just in a weird spot at the moment, at the minute, because logically you would think, okay, he has a good chance, he can win a major. He's young, he's 24. There's plenty of good years around him, but he's kind of sandwiched in between two situations here, where you have Novak, who is probably going to be primed for another 2 years. And then you have, these Carlos. It's not just Carlos though. There's Sinner, there's Rune.
Yeah.
A lot of, Medvedev.
No, he can hold his own. He can hold his own with the Sinners and Runes, but still, it's difficult. You're right. Not to mention the whole cluster of other guys that on any given day, someone like a Jerry who had beaten him the last time they played prior to Roland-Garros. So, yeah, it's not going to be easy. On the other hand, he just strikes me as a top of the line professional. That he's just going to keep doing his job as well as he can do it every day, and he's got pretty darn good mechanics. And sure, there's still some issues with his backhand, but he's got a great forehand. His backhand has improved. He volleys nicely, and his serve, I think, is a bit underrated. I think the fact that Novak broke him so few times. Novak got the 1 break back in the first set, broke him early in the second and late in the third. 3 breaks in 3 sets against Novak Djokovic. That's no embarrassment.
Yeah, I just feel like he's a little narratively stuck. It's a bit like Tsitsipas, where it's just you would. And, to his credit, I think he's worked on a lot of his weaknesses, even more than some of those other guys, and Tsitsipas, Zverev, and players like that, because he is hitting his backhand down the line a little bit better. He is taking a few more risks, and they do feel safe. And like you said, his serve is kind of a little underrated. He has that low ball toss and very quick motion. It's a little hard to read for a lot of the top guys. And so he's certainly holding his own and making a move. I got to think he's probably going to, something that would help is if he just won like a Masters 1000. And if he just won one of these big titles, I just think more players would start to feel like, okay, like Casper is a real threat, and they'd start to fear him a bit more, and he'd have more of that aura factor walking onto the court, because he has played his last 2 major finals well.
Yeah, no, he has, and listen, it's true. He's got to find a way to start winning some 500s too, and start with the 500s, win some 1000s, and that will all help him. On the other hand, when he can look back and say, I've been in 2 French finals in a row, I've been in the U.S. Open final, he realizes, okay, I've shown everybody that I can do this. and I've lost to great players, and I'm going to keep plugging away, and my time will come. And who knows, maybe he does squeeze one off. But if he's one of these guys that ends his career losing, another 4 or 5 major finals and just stays in the top 10 in the world for a long time, that's no disgrace either. Yeah. And that may be what he has to settle for.
Yeah, I think so too. I guess that let's talk about a few more of the upsets that sort of happened earlier on in the tournament. I wanted to get your thoughts about Sinner, actually, because obviously he played, Sinner has been fairly close in terms of he's always been losing to the runner-up or the winner in the last 3-4 majors that he's played, against Novak at Wimbledon, and then US Open where he had match point against Alcaraz, and then at the Australian Open this year losing a tight one to Tsitsipas. Here he loses another tight match, although it's a match he's very much on paper expected to win, should have won it, had the match points in the 4th set, didn't put away the overhead, and a lot of chances in the 5th. And where do you kind of see his season now? Because he sort of had a good start to the year, doing well in the Masters 1000, beat Alcaraz in Miami, and then, got a bit sick in the build up to the French Open, which I think really hurt him in a big way in terms of getting some more matches that he would have liked. But this was an opportunity here with Medvedev out in the first round, who he has an 0-6 record against. I felt like this was his time to make a major semifinal, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, listen, I thought I was so impressed, regardless of Carlos had a couple of issues, cramps and another injury in that match, but still in Miami, Sinner played beautifully. And then it was a bit disappointing in the final, but as you said, he's 0-6 with Medvedev. He's had just real headaches with him. But I didn't really feel that after the Runa loss in a really hard-fought, high-quality Monte Carlo match that he played, had a good clay court circuit. I didn't like what I saw coming into this event. And sure enough, I think it led to this loss. And maybe he would have closed it out, as you said, put us away one overhead, and he's right there. It's right on his racket at match point. And I once it went 5, it was a roll of the dice, and he almost pulled it out, but wasn't quite good enough to do it. But I was disappointed, but not shocked, because I felt the clay court circuit should have been better for him. I expected to see him do more than he did. So once again, we just wonder when is it gonna happen for him? He's so overpowering at times. He's very gifted. He's very driven. It's all there. The package is there, I think, for him to be threatening and winning some majors in the future. But so far, I think he's a little behind schedule. I mean, we'll see what happens at Wimbledon. Last year, he had the 2-set lead against Novak. Wasn't able to close him out, but it was a great performance nonetheless. Let's see. I keep being a little. I feel I'm just a little disappointed thus far in his progress. Some of it is bad luck here at match point against Carlos at the US Open. I mean, he played well enough to win that match, and who's to say that if he wins that match, what he would have gone on to do? But so far, those magic golden moments have not happened for him. I do think he's really lucky to have Cahill in his corner. And that might eventually, that's where the rewards he may reap the rewards sooner than we think, because Cahill really knows what he's talking about. But to me, he's still an underachiever. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, to a certain extent, for sure. I mean, I certainly would have expected him to have won a Masters 1000 by now, or to have, flipped a little bit more of those head-to-heads more than he has. That is a little concerning that he has a losing record against almost everyone in the top 10 aside from Rublev and Alcaraz. And he is a bit more injury prone than I would like to. So, and you saw the breakthrough that he had in 2020 when he got to the quarters as a 19-year-old, and he played Nadal here, and he played him very tight. And so since that time, 3 years ahead, I would have expected a little bit more. I do agree with that, actually.
I think a lot about those Nadal matches, and serving for the first set. And again, you understood it then. But now he's got a lot more seasoning, a couple more years behind him, and it doesn't seem to change. And I feel a little sorry for him, because he wants it so badly, and he's so capable. And you figure long term, he's going to be one of the most important rivals for Carlos, for sure. But he's got to get to him more too. I mean, he's got to be recording the same kinds of results and always consistently be in the latter stages of majors and winning some 1000s. And look, there's a lot of chances still available to him the rest of this year. So I want to reserve judgments. I don't want to be too hard on him now, but I hope something can break for him between now and the end of the year that can change his outlook.
Yeah, certainly. And of course, he's still only 21. But
Yeah.
there's one more thing also in the press conference. I felt like he'd be a little more disappointed than he was, because he did mention he did kind of, he was asked like what is his goals for the year, and he mentioned that he really wants to make Turin. And I'm thinking like, okay, I mean, you did that 2 years ago as an alternate. You didn't get there last year because
Yeah.
no points at Wimbledon, and your ranking, you were losing a lot of quarterfinals, and you didn't really have that big title. But I'm thinking like you could aim a little higher than that, like Turin, like I feel like he's a top 5, top 6 player. Like he should get there. Like, you know, like I think it's a different mindset. Like I think Holger Rune in that position probably would have said, I want to win a slam, by the end of this year. And maybe that's just psychological. Maybe he is just a lot more process oriented, and
Could be.
it's not so much driven by immediate goals. But just I would like him to set the bar a little higher.
I wouldn't doubt that behind the scenes when he's talking with his coaches and his family and his friends,
Yeah,
that he's saying slightly different things. I
that's a
don't
good
mean
point.
that
Yeah.
critically, but it's sort of protecting himself publicly in a way. That's the feeling I get.
Yeah. Certainly hope he can get to the latter stages more often now and get that major semifinal, and just, because these matches against Carlos are absolutely riveting, and it's some of the highest quality tennis we've seen. So
Listen, it would be fun to see them re-engage at Wimbledon again this year. See a rematch at
yeah.
Wimbledon. I would love to see that, to see if he could still beat him on the grass the way he did a year ago. I'd give him a decent chance. So we'll see. We'll see. He's a very appealing guy in his way, and I love to watch him play. And when he's in full flight, he's a joy to watch. So let's hope that things will turn around for him.
Yeah, certainly. And then of course, obviously the big one is Medvedev. Came into this, with the, number one in the race, and basically won all those titles, and won in Rome, and that didn't seem like a fluke either, because he's improved his forehand, and he beat some real quality players to win that title. And you would think expectations are pretty high for him to. I mean, I had him getting all the way to the final in my pre-tournament predictions as well,
Medvedev,
yeah, because I just
yeah.
felt like his draw was good. Until he, I didn't know who the qualifier was, and I knew, that qualifier is very dangerous in Thiago Zybot Wilch. He's a pretty underrated guy in general, and we haven't really seen his best level in 3 years or so, but he has one of the best forehands in the game, and I do feel like he played an outstanding match, played out of his skin, especially in the last 2 sets. But Medvedev, on the other hand, didn't play so well, and he hit 15 double faults, and I felt like he should be controlling that serve a bit better. I know it's windy, but he certainly should have put that match away.
He also got broken 3 times in the 5th set, which is not acceptable for him. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. That guy's forehand, Brazilian's forehand, I don't want to even I'm not going to even try pronouncing his name, Vansh. I leave that to you. But his forehand is phenomenal, and that's in the end won him the match, because he went for the line so often and hit them so frequently. But I was disappointed in Medvedev. Like you, I thought he had a decent shot at getting to the finals. Would have thought he would at least make the semis, and kind of wasted his triumphant run in Rome, which was so joyous for him to finally win a clay court tournament and do it at a Masters 1000. And here's a guy with 5 titles this year, and he loses in the 3rd round of the Australian. He loses in the 1st round of Roland-Garros. And who knows what he'll do at Wimbledon. Obviously, if he survives those early rounds, he could do quite well at Wimbledon. Who's to say? He's got a shot at it, and he certainly could get to the final. But I don't understand somebody playing that well week in and week out in that many big tournaments. And okay, maybe he got caught off guard and Court had played a very good match against him in Australia. Might have been hurting a little. Who's to say? But this one shouldn't have happened, in my view. This one he should have survived. And who's to say if he would have survived it, maybe he would have gone on a pretty good run at Roland-Garros. So that's what makes him so interesting. We've seen these ups and downs from him across the last few years that are sometimes very unexpected. And he's got a lot to be proud of with the way he's played this year. But let's see what he does now in the last 2 majors after being so subpar in the first 2.
Yeah, I'm very curious about Wimbledon, because like last year was, psychologically he wasn't in a great place, obviously, with his game, and just wasn't allowed to play Wimbledon. But I'm curious to see just if there's any progress made on that surface, and if he can go pretty deep, because logically if you look at his game, you would think there are probably a few things like with the return position and just playing too much defense maybe at times. But I feel like he can. I feel like he has the type of game that can translate well to grass, but we just haven't seen it in full flow yet.
Yeah, I don't know whether he would ever be as good on grass as he is on hard.
Yeah.
But he could be close. He could be close. And the serve alone should make him quite dangerous at the All England Club. No doubt about it. But listen, psychologically, he's a hard guy to understand. I did feel, to his credit, he didn't get too flustered in that loss at Roland-Garros. His temperament was okay. We've seen him when he really sort of loses it mentally and does a lot of whining to his corner and his entourage, and he sort of gives away that he's so frazzled. I didn't get that impression this time, but he still didn't play well. The stability in his game was still not there when he needed it. So Wimbledon will be very interesting, and because granted, he'll have his chances after Wimbledon to get back on hard and go back to the Open, and all of that is there for him. But I don't think he wants a third straight disappointment at a major. I think he wants to at least make a run at Wimbledon and go deep into the draw.
Yeah, certainly. And he also switched that whole clay court narrative, about him. Not that he really needed to, but I just felt like, in Rome, he showed a bit more, and, maybe the conditions did really help him there in terms of it not bouncing so high up, and it was so slow and dead a lot of the times. It was really rainy for those 2 weeks and didn't have to slide as much. He could basically essentially play his hard court game with a few adjustments, and he adapted his game well to it. So certainly he could.
Yeah, and he wasn't wild about the heavier balls in Roland-Garros. I get that, and he didn't feel like he could penetrate with his shots the same way with a combination of spin and power like his opponent could. I get all that. And forehand didn't look as good as it had in Rome, but still, you just got to find a way to get through those matches somehow and will your way through it. And he didn't do that, and I'm sure that was frustrating. And but still, he's right back out on the grass now. He's trying to prepare well for Wimbledon. He'll be glad that he gets a chance to go back there this year. And he still does have the confidence of how well he played over the majority of this season. So he'll be fascinating to watch at Wimbledon.
Yeah, for sure. Someone else who I think will be pretty fascinating is Taylor Fritz, because of course he I would say he had an okay clay season. Like I was impressed with him in Monte Carlo, and he had certainly had chances to even win that semifinal against Rublev, and then he sort of played many matches. He was sort of winning a couple of matches every single week and losing a tight one, just not coming through in the clutch in some of these moments. And I felt like that against Cerundolo as well. It's no disgrace because Cerundolo was a great clay court player himself, and probably someone, it's not a major upset to see him lose to Cerundolo in a third round match at Roland Garros. But I think he can take a lot from this clay court season, and he can should be doing a lot better in these majors, though. I think from now on, I mean, he's only been a top player for the last year, so I don't want to be that harsh of him because that perception wasn't there beforehand. But I do definitely think, Wimbledon and US Open, those are the ones where you could really see him get to a semifinal, final, even win the thing. If
listen, no doubt about it. He had the shock first round loss at the Open last year, but he played well at Wimbledon and probably should have beaten Rafa. Rafa just won it maybe on know-how, experience, confidence, having won the first 2 majors. There are probably many factors that got him through that match when he was obviously hurting. So Taylor, yes, I hope that he really is priming himself for Wimbledon. That I feel like so far he's tended to treat every tournament the same way, which in some ways is terrific, and he's gotten him some good results, and he bounces back from bruising losses. But you'd like to see him. You're right. You'd like to see him, and yet there's going to be opportunities in abundance, hopefully, at these next 2 majors. But he wants to start off with a good Wimbledon, and obviously with his serve and his game, he's well suited to. He could do some very good things at Wimbledon, I hope the draw is kind, and I do think he's got a kind of a good persevering attitude, and he doesn't get too weighed down by defeats. He doesn't like losing, but he tends to sort of get right on with the next tournament. So, yeah, I'm glad you brought him up. I think he can be a factor at Wimbledon for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I guess, is there any other players that really caught your eye that you're curious about, either for the grass season on the men's side or just about the Roland Garros campaign that impressed you, or maybe vice versa?
Well, I feel like I was a little sorry retrospectively that Cerundolo didn't win that match against Holger Rune, only because I think physically it would have been a different turnaround for him, and he would have gone out against Casper Ruud. It could have been a great, riveting match, and who's to know what might have happened. But I'm very impressed with his progress. He's not the same player I've seen in years gone by. I like where he's headed. I don't see him. It's not going to happen for him at Wimbledon. I seriously doubt that. But I liked how he played on the clay, and I had a lot of sympathy for him not winning that match, in that it was really much in the end almost a flip of the coin as to who was going to take that final set tiebreak. So he impressed me a lot. I'm trying to think of anybody else who could potentially. I mean, obviously, I'm fascinated to see what happens to Kyrgios, who's been gone this long, and remembers the run that he had at Wimbledon last year. Obviously, it's the grass suits him to the hilt with his serve and his game. But can he do it in this short span of time, just trying to get ready with a few grass court events, be ready to kind of go back and make that kind of a similarly stirring run this year? I mean, it's possible, but I don't know. I mean, I think it would have been different if he kept going, and he played so well last summer, and obviously he beat Medvedev over the summer twice, including at the Open. And then, shortly thereafter, after Tokyo, I guess he just was out of commission. And I'm wondering, can he do it after so much time away from the sport? I have my doubts, but I certainly will find him one of the more compelling figures there to see where he lands in the draw and what he can do and what his frame of mind is, whether he can sort of draw on the memories of a year ago and try to recreate it and find himself back in the final again this year. Doubtful, but well worth watching.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I would also throw in like Milos Raonic coming back after 2 years and winning a match on the grass. He's certainly a very natural grass court player and one of the better movers on that, just for that surface in particular. So I think
I hope I'm happy that he's coming back now, and the timing couldn't be better, and he loves the grass, and he'll be, who knows where he lands, but nobody's going to enjoy playing him even after all this time away. So I'll be watching Raonic closely as well. But obviously, otherwise, it's going to be the usual suspects. I do wonder whether Tsitsipas, I mean, he happened to lose to Kyrgios a year ago. That was a tough draw to play him at the end of the first week. But, can he finally adjust? I mean, we've seen what he can do on clay. We've seen what he can do on hard courts. He's been in a clay court major final, a hard court major final. Can he now show us his best stuff on grass, or is he still too lacking in the return to serve department to make that happen? I think he has the serve, but is his return game good enough? And how does he feel right now coming off with kind of a shellacking against Carlos? Granted, he made the third set competitive and somehow got it into a tiebreak after being down 2-5, but still, he was beaten so soundly the first two sets, and Carlos he's never beaten him yet, but that was not a pleasant experience for him, and I'm just wondering what to expect from him at Wimbledon, whether he can finally have a strong Wimbledon.
Yeah, in some ways, I felt like he was primed to do a bit better last year. I mean, he had a tough draw with Kyrgios in the third round, and he had just won a title the week before, and I felt like his draw was good had he got past Kyrgios.
Yeah,
it was a real opportunity to even get all the way to the final with the way that draw on the field was.
And that was tough, and it was a hard fought and contentious match with Nick. We know that, but bottom line is he didn't win it, and he demands a lot for himself. He's a really kind of a complicated guy, and sometimes he gets in his own way. He'd be the first to admit it, but he's really great fun to watch when he's playing his best tennis. And I hope that we'll see his best tennis at Wimbledon.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to follow, of course, because he's now in a relationship with Paulo Badosa, and then he also has some off-court stuff, obviously, with like Philippoussis not in his corner anymore, and there's
that I think is unfortunate, Vansh. That I thought was too bad. I thought there were signs to me that Philippoussis was helpful, and then once more gets back to his father. Is his father too much of an overarching figure? Does he have too much control? And I thought, I'm sorry that Philippoussis, who had seemed to have some very good ideas and good technical advice as well. I was sorry that he left the scene and would have preferred that they gave him more of a chance. So yes, I know the father's less of a problem in some ways because coaching, he can shout at him now without getting in trouble anymore. The rules are helping, but I don't see the evidence that his father is necessarily the best man to take him to that next level, from Grand Slam finalist to Grand Slam champion. I could be wrong, but I believe they need some other ideas. And Philippoussis was to my way of thinking a good choice. I hope they can find somebody else and whoever it is able to be given the authority where Stefanos has looked at, I want you to it's about him now. I want you to take more of a back seat. I would hope he would say that, but maybe that's too late.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I've always been of the opinion that his father is kind of holding him back more than helping him, especially at this point in his career, such a pivotal time that he's in. So, but certainly a couple of other names that just came to my mind, certainly on the grass, I would say Denis Shapovalov and Hubert Herkoch. For me, those are two who I think desperately need a good grass season. Herkoch in particular, because we've seen what he can do semifinals before and won in Halle, but he's kind of stagnated in some areas of his game, and I feel like he could use a really good result just in terms of a boost up, a bit forgotten, and just hasn't looked that great all year. Played a lot of tie breaks and just haven't felt good about his forehand, and just you would have thought with Craig Boynton in his corner, certainly you would have expected a bit more. And then Shapovalov just with his erratic nature.
Great, yeah, I agree, and Craig's done a nice job with him. I can't really attribute it to Craig so much as that Herkoch is just going through a difficult phase here, and you're right, it's been a very disappointing year. Wimbledon, yeah, he could turn it around at Wimbledon. I feel like he's so different from Denis in that Herkoch is percentage oriented. He knows exactly what he's doing out there. He doesn't he doesn't try to be just some kind of a sparkling shot maker. He plays to the right patterns, and he has a great serve. And you're right, the forehand sometimes gets shaky, and it is right now. I think that this would be the logical place he could turn around. Denis, I don't know. We saw him play Carlos. He had a 4-1 lead, and he could have won a set, was up 4-1 and lost the set. But he can try to draw on the memories as Herkoch can, both of them being the semis that year, a couple of years ago, Herkoch beating Roger and losing in the semi to Berrettini, and then Denis losing to Novak. They both want to try to draw on those memories. I'm a bit more optimistic about Herkoch turning it around there. Denis, it's possible that he suddenly ignites. He is a very streaky player, so it's possible that he gets on another one of those runs. But boy, since Wimbledon a couple of years ago, and then Djokovic even went up to him in the locker room afterwards and told him he was going to have his day, and I think he really believed that. It's been a very disappointing record for him. And then for Hubie this year, it's been very disappointing. So I'm glad you brought them up. I'm a bit more optimistic at the moment about Herkoch.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. He can certainly turn it around. But now I want to talk a bit about the women, of course, because the last 3 matches of this tournament were highly compelling, and it was a great watch. Some of the best matches all year, particularly that Muchova-Sabalenka match. I think it's just so great to have Muchova back as a legit contender and see what she can do when she's actually healthy, because we know a couple of years ago she beat Ash Barty. She's 5-0 against top 3 players. She's had a lot of big wins, but hasn't been able to string together a nice run where more of the mainstream attention is on her, and you can really see her sort of all-court game. I think to me she's the most similar. The most similar comparison is obviously Ash Barty, but just the style of play that she has with the slice and the big serve, and maybe the serve isn't quite as big of a weapon as Ash, but she certainly has that all-court game, and drawing players forward, and just a very enjoyable game. Knocks out volleys at the net, and it seemed to work really on clay so well. And this is probably not even her best surface, so I'm just happy to see her do so well, and hopefully she can stay healthy, because she can be a real mainstay in the top 10.
Well, listen, when she got going in both matches, it was spectacular to watch, and I don't know how she turned that around from 2-5 in the third of the semis and 22 out of 27 points. I mean, that she saves a match point, and then not only that, what nobody talks about is that Sabalenka at 5-all had 40-15, and then suddenly serves a couple of doubles, and Muchova breaks her there and wins the match. Then the final again, to be down 6-2, 3-love to Iga. and then win that set 7-5 and go up the early break 2-love in the third. And then it was a real tussle from there. And she's down 3-2. Then she's up 4-3 serving and finally loses the match the last 3 games. But I agree with you. She's very reminiscent of Ash. I mean, she's got a good, complete all-around game. She's very explosive. She volleys exceedingly well. Yeah, I hope she stays in the forefront. I hope she stays healthy. Because she put herself in a position to even win that final. I give Swiatek a lot of credit for pulling it out in the end because it was completely slipping away from her. And Muchova is a real talent, and she's a real crowd pleaser because you don't always know what's coming next. You know, whether she comes forward a lot, doesn't hesitate, has the good serve, terrific technique on the volley. She's got a lot of verve. So I share your view that you hope she can stay at this level, keep going now and make a move, because women's tennis would benefit from somebody who has that kind of style and that kind of versatility.
Yeah, I totally agree. And of course, a bit of a disappointing end for Sabalenka as well to have not closed out that match, just because, you know, she's been so good all year. She's been the best player really in 2023. So for her to have the final right there and not get there has to be certainly disappointing, because she has lost quite a lot of semifinals now. But this
That's
one,
true, but at least she can console herself a bit knowing she won the last major, you know, and she got it done in Australia, which was important to her. So I think the important thing for her is to come back strong at Wimbledon, where she's a real candidate to win the title, and see what she can do there, and not dwell too much on this defeat, which was devastating in its way, but just start thinking about Wimbledon and how it's been a great year all around, and just build on that. And I had the feeling, looking at her reaction, that she's going to be able to do that. But obviously, it was a brutal blow for her, because she wanted to get another chance, play Iga in a big final. That would have been very interesting. I would still think Swiatek would have won, but she would have been pressed very hard.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And obviously, I was very impressed by Iga in that final, and just her ability to just win it in the end, because, you know, she was down a break twice in the third. And then even at 4-all, she was down a break point, and she hit this amazing backhand approach. It was a very tough shot, really low, and didn't even have to hit a volley after that. And then 2 unreturnable serves to hold for 5-4. And that just put so much pressure on Muchova, who was feeling it physically and also serving to stay in the match.
Yeah, and also what I also liked was Iga came in a couple of times there near the end. She made one beautiful backhand volley down the line winner. And I hope that will sort of sink into her system a bit. There are times when she hesitates to come forward. She doesn't really like coming in. She's not as comfortable, even though I think her volleying technique is fine. So she's not taking advantage of shots that could get her up there in the transition game. She's just got to be willing to occasionally get past, but to make that move forward when it's there. It just would make her a more complete player, make her a better player. So that was an important win for her, to do it in that fashion, as opposed to the straight set finals that she's played the 3 times previously in the major finals, to get this one done in 3 from kind of dire position twice in the third set, as you said. Good effort.
Yeah, certainly so. And of course, you know, there were, in a way, I feel like she really kind of could have used this title, just because of the aura that she has here, and just, you know, not having won a big title since the US Open, and just with Sabalenka, Rybakina, you know, just more players on her heels. I felt like this was huge for her, and it has to be one of the most satisfying of her 4 majors so far, just in terms of the, you know, coming back from that adversity in the final. You know, had won her first 7 sets, which is an outstanding record in major finals, and she's now got 4 on the board. And you got to think, at least at the French Open alone, she can win another 4 or 5. So it's very
I think so.
that
Certainly another 3. I would say 3 great chance, maybe more, but 3 wouldn't surprise me at all. And then, I think she's got more US Opens in her. She should be able to start getting some things done in Australia, and we'll find out about Wimbledon. I believe that she, you know, with her mobility, I mean, she's so fast afoot, and you know, her movement around, just her general movement around the court. I feel like, you know, she ought to be a good grass court player for that reason alone. And let's see what happens this year. You know, Rybakina has to defend. she may well defend. That wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, totally agree. I think I have Rybakina as the favorite just right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think she's supposed to play one warm-up tournament the week before Wimbledon. So, she's another one just like Carlos who doesn't have that experience on the grass yet, even though she's won junior Wimbledon, and but that was just because she was so much better than everyone else. So it's interesting to see just how she performs this time. And last year she had that whole pressure of the whole streak, a lot of expectations, and she didn't really deep down believe she was any good on grass. So I think this year could be a little different. We could see her going further.
Yeah, no doubt. It's an interesting time for the women, and Sabalenka and Swiatek are going to be in a battle for that #1 ranking, and Rybakina is going to be right in there too, and maybe now Muchova is going to make her move and sort of join them and make it more of a big 4 than a big 3, and I'm looking forward to it. Wimbledon will tell us a few things.
Yeah, certainly. And look, I hope we get Sabalenka, Rybakina, Swiatek, and maybe one of Jabeur and Muchova in the semifinals. That would be the best lineup I think we could ask for.
Yeah, we definitely shouldn't leave Jabeur out of it.
Yeah, for sure. Because, she had no expectations coming into this tournament, but I felt like that was maybe an opportunity missed to get to the semis. Probably would have lost to Swiatek, but yeah, hopefully
should have been there. Yeah, I agree. She should have been there.
Yeah, for sure. But Steve, this was an awesome blast as it always is, and I can't wait to do the Wimbledon recap. It just should be right around the corner.
Yeah, same here, Vansh. It was fun, and it was a very enjoyable couple of weeks. That French, one of them, I enjoyed that one more than I have in a long time there, and so many interesting things happened that it sets the stage for a really compelling Wimbledon, I think.
Yeah, totally agree, and look forward to it. Thank you so much, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Vansh.